Whenever the topic of doomsday came up, great-grandma would argue that the world was going to end in germs. Now we giggled, we thought she was cute and adorable, but little did we know that she grew up in the aftermath of the worldwide pandemic of 1918, which killed about 50 million people, young and old. So perhaps one day when I'm a great-grandma, I'll be saying, germs, they're going to kill us all. Welcome to Morning Tea.
Hi, I'm Joanne Jolie, business owner, executive director, internationally licensed yacht helmsman, mother of 5, grandmother of 6, pianist, composer, and musical artist with a message of the power of music for health and well-being.
Thanks to the current coronavirus, we are now hyper-aware of how a plague can upend our lives, our society, our world. But crisis is nothing new to the world, and it's an excellent gauge for us to measure how we've been spending our days. And here's a few of the things that we've learned. Number one, we stopped saving. It used to be understood that the first 10% of your paycheck went straight to the savings account until you had built up about a 3 to 6 month minimum in case of a disaster and your income stream stopped. We lived without debt, with the exception of a reasonable mortgage. Credit cards were used for convenience and they were always paid off by the end of the month. Problem is that our recent generations have not lived within their means and not learned how to plan for the long term. So here's an example of how it's done. My daughter wanted a Cabbage Patch doll. They were very popular in the 80s, so we went to JCPenney where they had a layaway program. She picked out the doll she wanted. They kept the doll and she would bring in her earnings every week until the doll was paid off. Then we brought Dolly home and she was the proud owner of this possession. She had to wait patiently for the item and work for it. She learned many good lessons along the way and had a greater appreciation for the item once she was able to bring it home. I dug up this photo of Chrissy with her Cabbage Patch doll and it reminded me of another argument people make against savings. One of them is, we just don't have the income to save. Well, look again at that picture. Those dresses are designer dresses that I made for $2 each. At that time, a sewing pattern was 99 cents and I could pick up a yard of fabric for $1. And with the remnants, you can see I made a matching dress for Cabbage Patch. And I will just throw in here disaster preparedness. Today you can go to a myriad of wonderful websites that will show you what you need to have in storage for disasters when they might come. When the current pandemic started, N95 masks were nowhere to be found, but I had a box in my storage. Number two, many people have found that they're not so busy after all, and we can spend quality time together as a family. It's not so difficult to get everybody around the table for that all-important end of the day time together. That so important job will replace you in 24 hours. To your children, you are irreplaceable. Before you can blink your eyes, they'll be growing up and they'll be gone. Your job, your career, it's always there if you want it. Number three, over the last few decades, parents have become weaker and relinquished their authority, failing to enforce good standards and rules in the home. But now discovered that children can and will obey rules. There was an interesting experiment done. Children were placed in a field. In the center of the field, there was no boundary or fence. Now they tended to be insecure and sort of hover around the middle. They didn't venture out very far. Another group was tested, but this time with a fence on the border. The children felt much freer to run and roam throughout the entire territory, pushing up against the boundary, behaving more creatively. With firm, clear boundaries, children know just exactly how far they can go. Children want rules, they need rules, and more than anything, they need to see that you have the will to enforce those rules. And then there's number four, the stuff, the material things. You know, I've seen so many stories by people who have recovered from COVID or they've lost loved ones from COVID, and they say the same thing. There's a familiar theme, and that is, I didn't realize how short life is, how frail life is, how fine the line is between life and death. They've realized that the pursuit of material things takes precious hours away from the things in our life that are far more valuable. The wise preacher in Ecclesiastes described it as chasing after the wind, and he called it vanity. But he does have an answer, so I encourage you to read that short book and find out what he said about the meaning of life. And number five, with all the time in quarantine, people have tapped into their creativity. For years they've said, I'd like to paint, I'd like to take up an instrument, I'd like to make jewelry, write a book, all these things, and now they've had the time to do it and realized the joy of being creative and the importance of it for your mental health. You have to remember, we're created in the image of a God who likes to make things. It's built into us. We have to find a way to express ourselves creatively. We can get very comfortable very easily with life, and then a crisis comes along and it's like a fire that tests us and it burns, but we can take advantage of the opportunity for growth. If you have faith, there's nothing that happens that doesn't have a purpose. And you can look through those eyes and say, I am here for a reason, in this time, in this place. What do I need to learn and what do I need to change? So thank you so much for being here. If you haven't already subscribed to this channel, go to joannejolie.com and sign up to receive all the latest news and music releases. And I look forward to seeing you next time.